All praises to Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, and let's get right into the lesson. It says, experts warn global starvation is coming by summer. Lack of oil, diesel, and fertilizer as the U.S. war of aggression on Iran has no end in sight. And that's the thing. This is actually a correct sentence because there is going to be no end in sight to this U.S. and Iran war until Yahweh comes back, where it says three fronts, one systemic failure. And the thing is, it's not going to stay at just three fronts. This war is going to expand, and more countries are going to get involved, right? So this crisis is going to get way worse in the coming months. It says the 2026 convergence. Fuel, fertilizer, and the math of global starvation. On March 27, 2026, Stanislav Krapanov, a former U.S. Army officer, supply chain executive, and military political analyst, now based in Russia, gave his assessment of two convergent crises: an attack on a key Russian position on the Baltic coast, and what he describes as permanent or near permanent collapse of Gulf energy infrastructure, right? Because you have these countries, America and Iran, bombing each other, well, and Israel, really bombing either each other's bases or each other's oil refineries, right? And what happens is we're now in a time where instead of seeing short-term damage from these strikes, we are now going to be experiencing long-term damage because you gotta understand, it takes time to build these things, right? And also, it takes time to be in a safe period in the first place to be able to build these things, right? So as the primary mover loses power, on March 28th, Russia's Russia's deputy Alexander announced a ban on gasoline exports starting April 1st, running through July 31st, and I believe Europe relies very heavily on gasoline exports. The timing is direct. Southern European planting season starts in April. Northern European planting runs from May onward, right? And it says right here, diesel is not optional for scale farming. It powers every tractor, every plow, every planting rig on large commercial farms, right? Because what's going to end up happening is your diesel is going to continue to get more expensive. So for these farmers, right, trying to fill up their tractor trailers, and even for these people that are in trucks, these trucking companies, they're gonna really have to be careful what to ship and really what not to ship, right? Basically, when you ration stuff, you ration what's gonna last you the longest. You don't ration what's gonna, you know, taste taste. You're not gonna ration what tastes the best, right? Slovakia. So the thing is you're gonna want to ration what you need most. And a lot of this thing is that trucks are going to be making certain trips and they're not going to be making certain trips at all, right? Because diesel is going to be so expensive. The price of oil right now, I believe, has passed $103. So farms operating hundreds of acres without substitute manual labor, without diesel at the right moment in the planting when the crops don't go in the ground, right? So not only is this an expensive gas problem, but this could also, not could also, but this will also be a food shortage problem. Where it says famine worldwide will hit by the summer. So can you imagine that the famine that's going to come? Can you imagine when the shelves when you come to see the shelves, they're just not as packed as they used to be. And people are going to see that. And people are going to start panic buying, which is going to make the food shortage, well, which is really going to make the food crisis, the coming famine, worse. And on top of that, not only will you be getting a food shortage, you'll also be getting extremely high uh, price rises, right? It says the Strait of Hormuz effectively closed on February 28th, 2026. Maritime traffic through the strait fell by 97% of the days following the strikes. The Gulf is the center of gravity for global nitrogen fertilizer production. The region, the region accounts for roughly 46% of global urea exports, 25% of ammonia trade, and 44% of seaborne sulfur supply. Sulfur being the essential feedstock for phosphate fertilizers. DAP and MAP for such right here. Qatar state fertilizer company Quafco operates the world's largest urea production site at 5.6 million metric tons of annual output, approximately 14% of global supply. Right. Quafco went offline on March 4th after Qatar Energy halted LNG production due to the conflict. With the no gas feedstock, there is no urea. Right. And we could see what urea is real quick, right? Because to be honest, I actually don't know what urea is. Right. Alright, well. If anyone wants to put in the comment section what that is, they can. Okay. So let's move on. It says Chris Lawson, VP at commodity analysis firm Crew, put the scope plainly. Around 30% of exportable fertilizer supply is simply not available right now. So imagine 30%, a 30% hit. That's going to increase prices like crazy. It says roughly 2.1 million tons of finished urea stockpile cannot be loaded onto vessels. It is sitting in warehouses on the wrong side of the blockade. Right. And let's get this out. Right. Revelation chapter 6, verse 6. And I heard a voice in the midst of the four living beings say, a measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny. And see thou hurt not the oil and the wine. Right. Because, as you can see, coming up, right, let's get NLT. Right. Here we go. Sometimes it's nice to look at these scriptures in different formats. So, here we go. And I heard a voice from the four living beings say, a loaf of bread or 3 loaves of barley will cost a day's pay. And don't waste the olive oil and wine, right? So people will be working hard their whole day paycheck, and their whole paycheck will only be able to afford them a loaf of bread, right? And we see a lesson from this in Weimar Republic, Germany, I believe, where you had a crazy hyperinflation crisis, but in this case, it won't be just an inflation crisis. It will be a serious food crisis, a serious food shortage, right? So this is going to be interesting, brother, but also exciting, right? So remember, depend on Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai for what we need, right? Things are going to get quite a bit more expensive. So if you need to, get certain stuff that you want to get before prices start to jump up again, then by all means go ahead. But do you know that Yahweh Bahashem Yahweh Shai is our source for food, right? And let me get this out. Okay. It says in Matthew chapter 4, verse 4. But he answered and said, "It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceedeth out of the mouth of Yahweh." Right. So here's the thing. You're going to have people in this food shortage who live on bread alone, who live on feeding their stomachs every chance they get. But Lord willing, as the elect, our bread is on the words of Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai. We are fed through the words of Yahweh. We are fed through these scriptures, right? We are fed in the Spirit. So while everyone is starving, Lord willing, we will be full, right? Well, everyone can't. Well, you're going to have people that can't even go a day without food. But the Spirit and power of Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai will be able to go weeks without food and be fine. Because we know that man doesn't live by bread alone, but by every word of Yahweh. So I hope this lesson was edifying. All praises to Yahweh Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, the elect 144,000, and Shalom.